Hi everybody, look, this is a quick public service announcement regarding this review. This review is going to be as spoiler-free as any review can be. What I'm not going to be doing is I'm not going to be looking deep inside what's called the exploration journal. I'm not going to be talking about any key elements of the story itself. I'm going to try and keep this as sparse of information as possible while still being relevant to the review at hand. Now, obviously, any review is going to include a level of spoilers. I'm going to be showing you inside the box. We're going to talk about the game, the mechanics, the overall story, and that's fine. If you don't want to know anything about Tainted Grail, then two things. First of all, why are you watching a review video? Secondly, please go and watch one of our other videos instead and save this experience for you. However, for those that you are staying, have they gone now? Good, they've gone. Right, for those of you that are staying, then as I say, I can promise you that this review will be as spoiler-free as possible. So, that's a public service announcement over with. Let's get on with this episode.
This island was never meant for humans. Looming on the border between our reality and the ancient power known as the Weirdness, it was populated by a mysterious, legendary race. Humans, however, came here anyway, with their wooden ships, their ambitious king, and his fellowship of knights. Running from a plague ravaging their distant homeland, they took the island piece by piece, raising menhirs of foreboding shape and mysterious purpose. The former masters of the island faded into legend. 400 years later, and not even their name remains. The people of Avalon call them the Four Dwellers. Times are harsh. The Red Death is back. The menhirs are dying, and without their power, the land itself crumbles back into the weirdness. That's why your hometown has gathered 5 of its strongest and wisest heroes and sent them to find help in distant Camelot. As these champions set out to brave the dangers of this wild land, you watch them from afar. You are not one of them.
Hi Not Board Gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark, and today's episode is a very, very special episode. We are doing a review today of one of the biggest and most anticipated releases of the year, that is Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon by Awaken Realms. Now, I think it's only fair to say that this is a review copy. When I went to Essen, I was speaking with Martin Swierkot, who owns Awaken Realms, and obviously he's one of the designers of Tainted Grail, and he handed me a copy of Tainted Grail for a review copy. So that won't, if you watch my other videos, that won't sway the review. Obviously, I will provide a critique on whether I like the game or not, and what I do like or don't like about the game. But I just wanted to be upfront and honest with you guys. So obviously, I say, Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, huge release this year, and it is an abstraction on the kind of King Arthur, Knights of Camelot tale, in the way that a lot of movies do, say Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or The Fisher King, or First Knight, or Excalibur, or Transformers, The Last Knight. Let's not talk about Transformers. Anyway, it's an abstraction based on the Arthurian legends, and it's set in a slightly otherworldly Avalon, if you like. And here we go. And you can see from the box itself, it's a fairly big and weighty box, and it's got the artwork on there, and there looks to be a sword in some kind of knight. I assume, no, it's not in a stone, it's in an eye, and here we see a figure of one of the menhirs, which we'll find out more about as we go through the game, standing over that. So what does it say on the back? It says, Tainted Grail is a story-rich survival and exploration game for 1 to 4 players, set in a dark universe that blends Arthurian legends and Celtic mythology with a unique dark vision. And as we look on the back, you can see it shows you a list of some of the components, and also it's not really a suggested layout. The layout changes as the game goes on, and I'll explain more as we get into the review itself. But there's a good amount of content, well, there's the right amount of content within this box, and you'll see in a moment when we get through to the unboxing video exactly what you get in the box for Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon. Now, I was also handed, as well, as part of the review copy, the Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon, the Monsters of Avalon miniatures as well. And as you can see in the back of there, it lists some of the minis that are in the box. I'll explain how some of those minis work with the base game, not all of them do, as we go into the review. So, I've had the game for about 3 weeks now. I have had a hospital visit, so that kind of delayed my time. I had to go in for an operation, delayed my time in being able to play it, but I've put about 20 hours into this game so far, and I do think that that gives me kind of enough pedigree, if you like, to be able to formulate an opinion and provide you guys with a review on this. Now, as it's a fairly big release, what I have done as well is the very next section is going to be an unboxing section, if you like, on Tainted Grail and on the Monsters of Avalon. So, if you don't want to watch that and you want to get straight to the gameplay and my thoughts on it, then skip to that time. And and therefore you will be able to find out more about my views on the game itself. Now, fortunately, as we go into the game, as well as coming with a rather excellent rulebook, which really does take you through everything, as I mentioned right at the beginning, this is going to be as spoiler-free as possible. So for most of the review, I'm going to be referring to the kind of solo tutorial scenario, which is a really good thing. What it does, it gives you a scenario where you're using the components from the game, but it doesn't spoil anything in the game itself. So when I said at the beginning, this is as spoiler-free as possible, this will enable me to make this review as spoiler-free as possible. And this is a really good kind of 4-page document which takes you through kind of a couple of cycles of the game and how to play the game, and it gives you a great indication on what you need to do as you delve further into the review itself. So, okay, very eager to get into this, very excited to tell you my views and my thoughts on Tainted Grail. So without much further ado, let's go and have a look at what's inside the box. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a relatively brief look at what you get inside the boxes of both the Tainted Grail core game and, of course, the Monsters of Avalon minis as well. Now, not everybody will have picked up the Monsters of Avalon, but of course, if you backed Tainted Grail, then you will be getting the core game. This is going to be as spoiler-free as I can make it. There are some key components inside this box which potentially, if I showed them to you, maybe spoil your enjoyment. That's more to do with this exploration journal, and I'll come on to that shortly. So, as we go into the box, the first thing that you're going to, or one of the first things you're going to see, is your Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon exploration journal. Now, as you go through the game and you play your various adventures, in here, and I'm not going to show anything, are various listings and numbers, and depending on what choices you make, you will read these out and they will guide your game, almost like a choose your own adventure type scenario. And at the back we actually have the tutorial, the exploration journal for the tutorial, as a separate thing. So when you first set up the game, and I could show you that because there's no real spoilers you can see there, when you first set up the game, you're allowed to play one scenario as a solo tutorial, and that gives you the gist of the game. So that is a very, very, very thick book. Not only do you get everything relating to all the cards that you're going to lay down, there's also something there called the Book of Secrets as well, and you can see that this is blue and BOS, and that gives you further adventures. You're also going to get, for each of your adventurers, a letter. So there's Beor, Eli, Arev, Neve, and Maggot, and that gives you a bit of background on why they were chosen for this adventure. There is a map as well, which gives you a rough indication of the land that you're exploring, but not everything is on there. It's kind of a dated map. And then you have your save sheet. So there's my current save sheet just there. I'm not going to get into too much detail. I've just finished chapter 2 on my current game, and that allows you to save the game midway through, because of course there's lots to play. Now then, each of your player boards are here, and you can see we have Maggot, Arev, Eli, Beor, and then we have Neve as well, that doesn't have a player board, but what you can do is just put her into any one of the player boards, and we'll come on to how they work later on. Then we're going to go inside the box. Now, in here I've got these Sundrop minis in here, and as you can see, these are the big statues, these are the menhirs, and you'll understand when we go into the review itself how these work. These are effectively your timing and your timing mechanism in the game, and also they allow you to uncover kind of other aspects of the board. Then you have your 5 characters there. So we have, as you can see on the Sundrop, I think that's Beor. There on the Sundrop, and these look beautiful. These are really good detailed. The Sundrop, if you've gone for Sundrop, I don't think you'll be disappointed in what comes out of that. There's Neve, who's a particular favourite of mine. My wife is called Neve and is spelled exactly the same way as well. And here we have a Four Dweller, and when these come onto the board and start hunting you down, yeah, things get a little bit scary. So that, as you can see, now for an Awaken Realms game, if you think about Nemesis and you think about Lords of Hellas, you think about anything that Awaken Realms have done, they tend to be mini heavy, and unless you've gone for the Monsters of Avalon box, you're not going to get loads of minis. There are but 2 dice in here. One is for moving Guardians around, which is this one. I'll explain what Guardians are later. And one is, again, just a standard D6, very nice D6, for making some decisions. Okay, so as we get down here, we have various encounter cards. And your encounter cards are blue, grey, green, and purple. And what you will do is put a number of them into your hand each chapter that you play, and there are varying difficulties, and they will tell you exactly kind of what baddies or what monsters you're going to either fight or use diplomacy on, and I'll come on to how that works. You also get a number of cards here, and these are probably the best that I show you. These are my current ones for maggots, I believe these are. For Maggot, and these are my combat advancement deck and my diplomacy advancement deck and my diplomacy and combat cards, and what these allow you to do is carry out combat throughout the game or allow you to carry out your diplomacy if you come along anybody that you have to talk to, like guards, etc. And there's a number of those for each individual character, and they are bespoke for each character, or each colour tray, should I say. So that is Maggot, that is Neves for me, and the reason they're here and not in this main part here is because these are saved from the game I'm currently playing, so it has a save slot. So when you finish the chapter, you can then save your current game state using this save sheet, and then put them in here and save them for later. And here we have my encounter cards for there as well, for the scenario I'm currently playing. We have down here some, these are skills cards here, so you get to upgrade your skills beyond what's on the board. And then we have some secrets cards. Do you want to see what's in there? No, they're secret. You're not going to get to see what's in there. So basically you will pull those out at various points throughout the game. And here we have item cards. Now these allow you to, the game allows you to pick up certain items as you go through the game. It'll give you a card number, and there you go. You can see various items that are on there. We can get a battered sword, a battered shield, a poisoned dagger, etc. And then the key part of the game is these, and these are effectively your map tiles, and you'll lay these down. It tells you which one will go where and how you lay them on the board, and only a certain number visible at any one time due to how the menhirs work. And these will then, you'll read the text on there, and it'll take you around the map. You read the text, and it will point you to the exploration journal, where you'll read the text in there and see where the adventure gets you. And as you can see, these kind of go, I know this is strictly set up in the right kind of way, these kind of go like this throughout the board and create this beautifully evocative map. So that's the core box of Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon. There are some other things. You have some marker cubes, you have these stat markers, and then these dials which you will put in your menhirs as well, and you also have some kind of token quests and timing tokens there as well. All that will become evident as we go through the review. As I say, I just wanted to show you a fairly spoiler-free review of what you get in the core box. It's not very mini heavy. At any one time, as a solo player, chances are you're either going to be playing it solo or double-headed solo, and you're probably going to have 2 characters and up to 3 menhirs on the board if you're doing double-headed. If you're not, chances are it's just going to be 1 character and up to 3 menhirs on the board. All these figures are required in the game. Anything that's in the Monsters of Avalon box is actually not necessarily required in the game, but adds a certain amount of kind of visual flavour to it. You can quite happily play the game without the Monsters of Avalon. So here we go on the back. It tells you all the various monsters that are in there, from the Underbrush Worm to the Worm Tangle to the Wolf Walker to the Dulhallan, the Mulchman, the Child of Morrigan, a Hell Pig. And as we go in here, you will see there's a little pictorial which tells you what's in there. And again, these are the Sunblock minis, and the quality of the minis is just astounding.
It is absolutely beautiful. I mean, I'm going to keep with the Sundrop because I think they look fantastic. If you haven't got Sundrops, you're going to have, if you want to paint over them, you're going to have many, many hours kind of painting over these. And as you can see, there's a fairly decent number of minis that go in there. But as I mentioned earlier, you don't actually need them. They are pure visual flavour. They are great to have if you've got them. They will allow you to put them on the board and kind of put in place of cards that you're going to place on the board. But if you don't have them, it's not the end of the world. And I do know that in the core game, and certainly what comes with the core game, you're only going to use a handful of these minis. Some of these minis won't actually be used until more expansions have been released. So that's kind of future-proofing what you can get for future games. But they are fantastic. So that's a fairly whistle-stop tour around what you get inside the box of Tainted Grail, Fall of Avalon, and also the Tainted Grail Monsters of Avalon as well. But that's not really why we're here, is it? Because what we want to do is have a look at how the game plays. So let's go into the gameplay now. So in Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon by Awaken Realms, we heard at the beginning that there was an expedition that took place, that 5 of the area's finest warriors went out to find out why the menhirs were darkening, what was happening, why was the weirdness creeping in. However, something has happened to that expedition. As it mentioned at the beginning, you weren't one of this expedition. So the villagers and the people of the area have now decided that, you know what, we need to find out what happened to our brightest and our best warriors, and they've pulled together the second brightest and second best warriors, the affected B team, to go out and find out what happened to the A team and also explore the wonderful landscape. So you will take part in this massively increasing and contracting landscape as you add more tiles and subtract tiles away from the playing area, and you will start to delve into this wonderfully deep story. Every exploration tile that you're going to go onto in Awaken Realms will require you to look into this massively detailed journal, and the story will progress, but in a choose your own adventure type way. There are multiple choices within each section that relates to a card on there, so the story is ever evolving, and you will make multiple visits to the exploration journal depending on which card you are. And as you're going out and you're exploring this landscape and you're fighting beasts and you're having diplomatic talks and you're battling using cubes and you're rolling a few dice and you may be running away from the forebearers, or you may be running away from the guardians, or you're battling the guardians, you're going to have a character that is worthy of this task. And the very first thing that you will do in Tainted Grail is going to be to set up your character. You, as a solo player, are going to choose between 1 and 4 characters. I've done it true solo with 1 character. I've also played it double-headed with 2 characters. In reality, the bookkeeping isn't that difficult between 1 and 2. I'm sure there is a real pedigree, a real kind of premium that you could get from playing 3 or 4 characters, but the more characters that you add, there are some minor things that you will kind of reduce from the time aspect of the game as well. So the very first thing you're going to do is play one of your characters. Now, for the tutorial scenario, which is what we're going to be talking about and help me to discuss the game without spoiling anything for you, it asks you to choose Beor. And I'll show you how we kind of set Beor in a moment. However, for my games, one of my favourites to choose is a tattooed, fiery-haired female character called Neve, who's a very feisty warrior. Why do I choose Neve, spelled Niamh? Well, my wife is called Neve, Niamh, and she's a fiery-haired, tattooed, fiercely independent woman. So it would feel really remiss for me not to use Neve in my adventures, as she's my partner in my adventure on life. However, for the sake of this video and this tutorial, we're going to be using Beor. So let's have a look at how you set up Beor or any of your characters as you progress throughout Avalon onto your adventure into Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon.
So the very first thing that you're going to do in Tainted Grail is you're going to set up your character. Now there are 5 characters, if you include Neve, and you've got Neve in your copy, but there are only 4 player boards. So how does that work? Well, each of these character tiles is interchangeable between each of the player boards, and each of these player boards is slightly asymmetric. It will offer different starting stats for energy, for health, and for terror, and your character will then also have some abilities that will then fill in terms of their skills here. So on the left here we have the combat skills, which are aggression, courage and practicality, and on the right we have the diplomacy skills, which are empathy, caution and spirituality. So to set each one up, on the back of each character's player tile, is a little bit of a backstory, and it tells you exactly what abilities, what skills they have. And you can see here that Beor is kind of combat heavy. He's got 2 in aggression, he's got 1 in courage, and he's got 1 in practicality, while over here on the diplomacy side he's only got 1 in caution. It also tells us that there are 3 food. He starts the game with 3 food and 1 wealth, and these are going to be your first interactions with the red cubes. Now trust me, on this score you will start to treat these things like little red cubes of crack. You are going to spend your entire game either chasing them down or giving them away, as you have to use them on almost every single action that you do, but we'll come on to those in a little bit. So here we see, going back to Beor and setting him up, we're going to put 2 cubes in his aggression. That means he has 2 there. We're going to put 1 in courage, and we're going to put 1 in practicality, and we're also going to put 1 in caution over here. We know he starts the game with 3 food and 1 wealth, and those go into those little wells, and then we can snap that back in. That doesn't have to come out here for the rest of the game. But we also, looking at the 3 columns here of energy, health and terror, as I say, there's an asymmetry here on this. There are little chevrons on each of the columns about where things go. So over on energy, he starts with 6, so we put a cube there. Over on terror, he starts with 0, and we put a cube there. And then for his health, we have this handy little marker, and as you can see, it's got a tiny little heart on there to symbol health, and we put that at the top. And what that means is it's got these little lines coming across from it, and as your health goes down, it means that your energy can never be higher than your health. So you've got a visual reminder of where your health is and how much energy you can have at any one point. And that is it. We have set Beor up. He is ready for his battle out onto the fields of Avalon. Let's have a look at how we set the board up now. So each chapter in Tainted Grail will ask you to set up the story and the map tiles in a slightly different way. However, for the solo and tutorial scenario, it's asking you to set the map tiles up like this. So the first tile that you're going to set up is going to be tile 101, and this is where you're going to place your men here. Now, you're not going to place your men here, although you will place that person here. This is the men here, and these are the kind of the statues and the entities that watch over the land of Avalon and protect it from the weirdness taking hold. However, these have started to go dark, and when they turn off, that means that the weirdness is going to creep in and start swallowing the land. So the first thing you're going to do is lay tile 101, and it asks you to lay a men here, and on here you have the statue, and you also have these timing discs as well, which have a number of numbers going around there, ranging up to 8. And for this first one, it asks you to place it on the tile 101. You set it at 8 minus 1 for every player. So I'm doing solo, so 8 down minus 1 is going to be 7. So we're going to set that for that, and that's the men here on there as well. But we're also going to put our man here. Not men here, man here, and this is where Beor's going to go on this tile. And by Beor being on this tile, that means that opens up every available and legal orthogonal tile that goes to it. So as we can see, that then makes the map look like this. How? There are little numbers here which state which tile goes where. So on 101, joined at this side by 104, joined at this side by 103, down at the bottom by 105, and up at the top by 102 from each of these arrows that are on there. So that is your starting kind of move. And as you explore around the map, so as Beor spent an energy and went there, we would then put tile 107 because there's an arrow up there, and tile 109 down at the bottom. There's no arrow off there. And then if you went here and spent more energy, we would put 108 down at the bottom there. There's no tile up to this. The only way to unveil this one is to be on that particular one and put 106. But what about if you was to, I don't know, if you was to go up to 107 here, that would open up this tile here, as well as opening up kind of 117 off that way. However, you really got to be aware of the kind of 9 tile radius around your menhir. These menhir help you kind of open up the map, and if you were to, throughout the day, you can move off and explore further areas, but when it gets to the end of the day, only these kind of 9 tiles here, using the menhir as the central, are going to remain on the board. So if you then have to rest off this map at the end of the day, then what's going to happen is the weirdness is going to consume that. You're going to get put back onto the board, but you're going to suffer a penalty for it. So the only other way to actually do that is to get to some other tiles that have the menhir symbol on there, and you put them on. Once you've activated them, you put them on with whatever the dial says, and that will then open these up. But first of all, that's difficult. There are different costs for each of those. You don't just activate a menhir by going on the tile. You have to pay certain costs. And secondly, as you progress throughout each day, then your dial is going to be reduced by 1. And eventually, no matter which menhir you've got, that's going to be taken off the board, maybe because he's gone dark, and that one becomes a new. And that means that only these tiles are then available. And that is kind of the core game of where you place your menhirs, what happens with the tiles, and what happens when your menhirs go dark. What's that you say? The areas that you've explored don't stay on the map permanently. And yes, that's true. See, in Tainted Grail, what happens is a lot of things that you think you know are going to get slightly flipped on their heads, and this is probably going to be the first instance of that, because you see these menhirs, not only are they the protectors on the area of keeping the weirdness away, but also they are dying, and because they're dying, that means the weirdness is going to start creeping in. They are going to become your kind of best friend as they allow more of the map to be opened up and explored, but unfortunately, because they are dying, they're also going to allow some of the map to constrict as well, and their power only goes so far. So although you may go off and explore almost any area of the map that you can in a certain given day, as long as you are back within the menhirs area, you're safe. But if you stay out of that menhirs area, then you're not safe, and you're only allowed 3 of these on the board at any one time. The game only comes with 3, so there's only so much of the map that can actually stay viable and visible and available to you as well. And also what that means as well, because what happens throughout the map is every kind of board tile that you go on has a number of options that you can explore within there. Some of them can only be explored if you have certain traits, certain abilities, certain secret cards that you get. And it may well be that, say, you get this tile here, and then you have to go off and explore a tile up here somewhere that's unexplored as of yet, before you can then come back and then do another exploration on this tile because it is triggered by something else. Of course, these menhirs only reach so far, so you have to time your game in terms of which menhirs you like, as and when you light them, and what resources you need to light the menhirs as well, because they take wildly different resources, and all the time their time dial is ticking down against you. So there's lots of things in this very early look at what happens in the gameplay already that you have to think about. You have to think about lighting the menhirs. You think about having to think about where you can explore. Each exploration is going to cost you 1 of your energy or 2 of your energy, depending on what cards you've drawn out of there. And there are things in the game that are going to want to kill you and also stop your quest as well. So let's have a look a little bit further into the mechanics of the gameplay and what happens as you explore throughout the map. Because at the heart of it, Tainted Grail is a procedural RPG. What you're going to do is you're going to spend the game and the entire journey that you're on kind of increasing the abilities of your character, and the only way you can do that is by exploring the map, keeping the main mission
in mind. You're going to find out initially what's happened to the first expedition, but also completing side quests and tasks, and then increasing the stats and abilities and wealth and reputation and food resources that your character has, enabling you to find bigger and better enemies and bad guys and have better kind of diplomatic conversations with people, all the while opening the map and unraveling the story. It really does play very much like a video game. And to start that, what you're going to do is you're going to explore. Not every tile that you go on, sometimes you will pass through them, but you'll come back and explore them at some point. I'll almost guarantee that every tile that is on the board at some point during your game will be explored. And to explore, you'll have moved your man on there, maybe spent an energy point to do that, and you will get given, you will be on a particular map. And here we are, we're on the Connacht Farmhold. And here it says here that I can spend 1 energy and I can gain 1 reputation once per day. And on the back of it gives us a little bit of flavour text as well. It says 101, Connacht Farmhold. A deep feeling of loss fills everything in Connacht, from dilapidated farms to the sunken eyes of those who remain in town. The men here in the market is all but extinguished, and everyone brave or resourceful enough has left to find a solution. And at the bottom, it tells you what the activation requirements are for that men here. So if it has gone dark and what you needed to do. And for there, I would need all characters on here. I would need a secret card, which is the Men Here Right secret card. I would have to pay 2 energy, 2 wealth, and 2 magic per player to get that men here back on and illuminated. But also it gives you a little bit there about, some text about what you can do in terms of the choices. But what you would do once you're exploring this is you would then flip to the relevant area in the exploration journal, and this becomes your very best friend. Now, in the main game, you're going to flip to 101, and I'm going to show you briefly. That tells you all the various verses there on 101, and there are a number of choices that you can make. Remember, I said this was very much a choose your own adventure game. In reality, it is. However, for the sake of the tutorial, the solo scenario, there's a special at the back scenario, kind of tutorial scenario about 101 on here. So here we go. It tells you a little bit about here. So we've already gone right. A deep feeling of loss pervades Connacht. It says now you're ready to choose what to do in this location, guys. By the way, I say this is the solo tutorial scenario. You're going to be playing this scenario, so I'm just going to read this little bit here. It tells you what to do. It's not going to impact the main game itself. So now you're ready to choose what to do in this location. Below are 2 options. Each has a requirement. So here are the options. It says I can speak with my master only if you don't have any part of the surprising errand status, and I'll come on to status in a moment. Or you can complete your mission, and that requires me to go to verse 1, or you can complete your mission if I've got part 2 of the surprising errand status. I don't have anything at the moment, so here we go. We're going to choose verse 1, which is to speak with my master. It says, Urfir is up earlier than usual. As you enter, he hides a large pack behind a curtain and turns to you with a wide smile. You here, lad? Good. Hope you're ready to stretch your legs a bit. I hear a starfill near Whitening, and a local tanner picked it up. It's a solid ingot, large as your dingy head. I'd rather not have it fall into the hands of some other smith. You nod. Falling stars are a bad omen for most simple folk, but they always excite blacksmiths and armourers. After all, the legendary Excalibur was forged from one of those cold shards of distant skies. Soon you depart, walking down the sloping fields towards a mist-covered forest, with some rations, your trusty hammer, and a purse of silver Urfir gave you. Before stepping into the shadow of the trees, you take one last look back at the ancient towering statue above the shacks and houses. How much longer can this tired old thing protect Connacht? And of course, talking about the men here. And here we go. We got, it tells you some here. So first of all, I'm going to gain part 1 of the surprising errand status. Gain 1 wealth, so that would be a red cube in my wealth marker there, and it says I've gained my first story related status. Mark it on your tutorial save sheet or write it down on a piece of paper. Beor also gains 1 wealth, and then it tells me that after that exploration ends and I should return to the game. So that's what happens. Is you then go back to the map and you make another choice. Am I going to stay here? Am I going to explore further? What energy do I have that allows me to do that? And that's a really interesting part, is that this is a solo tutorial. There's limited options in there, but I think as I showed you back
If you go into 101, absolutely, there are some kind of 9 verses and various things that you can do in 101 in the real game. And that is an overview on what happens there. But let's talk about what happens when you decide to end your turn. You see, because where you rest in Tainted Grail is sometimes as important as where you have explored, because not only does rest give you the opportunity, if you've paid food, to kind of increase your health back up and increase your energy back to its maximum and reduce its terror. If you have none of these red cubes left, which we've spoken about, they are very, 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 very rare commodity, not rare commodity, but a very much needed commodity. If you don't have any of the red cubes left, then you will recover less energy and you won't be able to recover your health, etc. However, not only does it allow that, it obviously acts as a reason for the next day starting, and the next day starting obviously means that your Menhir's time token, or any time tokens on the board, are going to either subtract or increase by 1. So that's a timing mechanism done. However, that is not all that rest is used for. You see, if you were to rest on a tile that has this symbol here, which is like like an eye blinking, that means that you will also experience either a dream or a nightmare on that particular tile, depending on the entry that's in the journal corresponding to that tile, and also depending on your status as to whether it's a dream or a nightmare. Now, importantly, some of these dreams are absolutely necessary to help you progress with the story. They will give you major hints. So, as I say, choosing where to dream or where to rest and have a dream is sometimes as important as choosing what exploration to have as well. For example, on a random page in this, and you will not know where this dream is connected to, if I was on this particular tile and I decided to rest there, it said if I had the dream, it said you return exhausted from your disappointing journey south. This entire land is uninhabitable, afflicted with strange magic, but this place is safe, as it always has been. Once the red vegetation surrounds you on both sides, you finally feel safe. Gain part 5 of the Far Point Clue status, and we'll come on to how statuses work on the save sheet very shortly. If I was to have a nightmare in this particular area, on this particular tile, it would give me some text, and then it would say each character who has this nightmare gains 1 terror point, and up goes my terror level. So as you can see, there are certain things that can only happen when you rest and when you dream or have a nightmare. So, we talked about the save sheets and the statuses. Let's have a look at these statuses and how this really starts to make the game excel at being kind of an RPG. So using paper-based system in a large, sprawling, exploring board game is nothing new. Of course, Dungeons and Dragons used it, probably the granddaddy of all these types of games, and then as we've gone through, the most recent one is probably Kingdom Death Monster. And whilst some of the games have really heavy bookkeeping, what they manage to do in Tainted Grail is keep it relatively light. You will get a pad of these save sheets, basically, and your statuses on there as well. And the front side is the save, so when you come away from the game, it actually allows you to record the state the game was in, makes it easy to put away and get out again. But the main thing which helps you throughout your campaign are these statuses. And you'll gain statuses by exploring certain areas, maybe taking a rest in a particular area, completing tasks, or gaining certain secret cards as well. And when you get them, all you do in a really, really clever way is you just put a cross in whichever one you've got. There's no massive bookkeeping, you're just filling a cross in. There are some 70 odd statuses you can collect there. Now that may sound like a lot, but let me tell you, my current game, I've just completed chapter 2, and there are 14 chapters, and chapter 2 took me about 5 hours to complete. So getting these 70 kind of statuses is going to take a long time, or getting the right kind of statuses, and you're never going to complete them all. I should imagine as your path in your journey forks throughout the game, then you will complete some statuses and not others. But when you complete a status, when you manage to tick something off on this sheet, let me tell you, this is part of the game that you feel like you've done something really new and exciting. It feels like you're going to get dividends for that. Some of them have already paid me dividends, some of them may not, and they may not for many, many games yet. It doesn't matter. I gain that status. I feel like I've achieved something, and that is the good thing about any RPG, is that you are constantly striving to improve and better your character and your chances of completing the game.
So far we have a game that is all about timing. It is about making sure that you're maximising your moves, that you are managing your resources by having the right amount of red cubes in food, in wealth, in experience, in magic, and in your stats as well. But like all these games throughout this detailed story, you're going to want to have an element of combat in there. Now, a lot of these games treat combat very differently. It may well be that you have a game that uses dice for combat, or it may be well that you have a game where you are checking your stats against an attacker's stats for combat, and then knocking or subtracting damage off that way. What Tainted Grail does is it has come up with a fairly involved card system, and you get initially a starting hand of some combat and some diplomacy cards. Now, combat cards are obviously for fighting, and diplomacy are for difficult conversations, let's put it that way, with maybe a guard or somebody that doesn't particularly like your personality or you come across. However, let's focus on combat because they both work in more or less the same way, and you get given a meagre hand of starting cards for combat. As you progress through the game and as you are levelling up your character and you're gaining experience points, you can actually use those experience points to buy more combat cards or diplomacy cards from your combat advancement deck or your diplomacy advancement deck, and that allows you more options in your combat and some stronger combat actions, which allows you to tackle the kind of strongest bad guys. However, that comes further on in the game. So when you come across an encounter, it's going to tell you which colour encounter to draw, and there are 4 colours. There's green, there's purple, there's blue, and there's grey, and generally the blue ones are for diplomacy and the rest are going to be some kind of creature that you're going to be fighting against. And here we go, very handy in the tutorial, it tells you what your first encounter is going to be, and it gives you this card. And as we flip this over, we can see it's mist-shaped vermin. Now there's lots of green text on there, that is obviously not on in the main game. In the rest of the encounter cards, that's just to take you through the first combat there. And it tells you that we have to inflict 4 damage on the mist-shaped vermin. It tells us here that's where we're going to put the damage cubes that we damaged, and this here is effectively what is the kind of the creatures come back to you after you've had your combat turn, and I'll explain how these work. So let's take this card, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw 3 from our combat deck. There we go, and that gives us 3 cards to play, and we get to play these down. Now how you do that is, as you can see on the side here, we have some matching symbols. So here we go, this one always matches at the bottom, and it says I get 1 times red cube on there, but it also says if I match this up with this particular ability on my card, then I can also claim a red cube for that. So there we go. Do I have a kind of an aggression stat? And yes, I do. I actually have 2 cubes in my aggression stat there, so that means I can play that against that card. And what that then gives me on that particular turn is it gives me 2 cubes against this creature. So that's already out of the 4 cubes that I need to kind of kill this creature, I have 2 cubes. But that's not the only thing I could do there. In the 2 cards that I have left in this particular hand, I can then add these on as long as these little kind of cards with lightning strikes line up to some of the abilities and I have the relevant trait. So here we can see if I was to then line this card up, what would happen is that I can line up this bonus to line up with that card if I have that trait. And do I have that trait? Yes, I have 1 in that particular trait there. So that means I can also use that card. There we go. And the green one there allows me to then also draw another card from the combat deck into my hand. So far, for this action, I have inflicted 2 damage, I've taken an extra card, I've lined up the combat, but it does say here that if I ended my go now and the creature retaliated against me, I would gain a red cube for every point of damage I receive. So let's end that there. There we go, I've got 2 cubes so far. It's now the creature's turn. And there we go, you can see 0 to 2, I would get 1 point of damage. But because of this trait on here, that means I get another cube. There we go, and now my creature has 3 damage out of its 4 against it, so I'm almost there. Now, it comes back to my turn again, and I can play any one of these cards as long as they match up. And there we go, if we look at this one, it does say that if I have 2 cubes in my aggression, I will gain a further 2 cubes. And I will also gain 1 cube down here for connecting because that always connects. And I do have that, so that actually gives me 5 cubes. I've destroyed that creature. However, sometimes in here you do get
abilities that you have to do, and that one means that at the point I lay down this card, I lose 1 energy from my board, and that's it. That is effectively combat. It's not that difficult a concept to get hold of. The tutorial takes you through it very, very well. Of course, we won't always be using the first encounter. And as you progress through the game, as your abilities increase, as your character increases, as you add more cards to your combat deck, you get the ability to string together some really, really hefty combos, and that's really, really good. And if you're playing double-headed, what happens is you take a turn, the creature attacks, and then the other player takes another turn, and it really starts to build up this rolling damage onto the creature. However, it is possible as well that you take on a creature that's a little bit too mighty for you, and you can end up losing combat, and for that there are penalties as well. Now, each combat deck comes with these little markers at the top here, and so these are all 1 difficulty, and as you progress through different chapters, it tells you to add either 2 difficulty, 3 difficulty, 4 difficulty in there, and obviously you're shuffling those up, and you don't know what you're going to come across, and that helps certainly create this procedural element of ever increasing potential bad guys, as well as using that for combat. It's more or less exactly the same rules for diplomacy, except for diplomacy what happens is you are potentially just, there we go, on diplomacy you're trying to win them over. So what you have is you start on the grey tile, and using that card system as before, your cube either moves up or goes down. When it reaches the top, you've won that kind of diplomatic outcome. When it reaches the bottom, you've lost it and you can reap the reward. And that is how the combat system works. It's a little bit different, it's a little bit unique, and you know what? It really fits within the theme of the game. I can potentially see some people not liking this combat system, and certainly in the early days, in the first couple of hours of playing it, it feels fairly rudimentary. But once you get kind of 3 or 4 hours into the game, and you're starting to build up this combat deck, you can really see those combos working together. However, Tainted Grail is a game about a story. It's a very deep and involving story that's going to take place over many, many hours of play, and how invested you are in this story is absolutely key to how much enjoyment you're going to get from the game. How much you like a text-based, choose-your-own style adventure in your board gaming is going to dictate as to whether or not this game is for you. This exploration journal literally drives everything along. Yes, you will get text and flavour text on the back of these cards, but there is a lot of story here that tells its tale through this, and it flows together by, as I say, unveiling what's on the back of the characters, going to the relevant chapter, and then kind of reading that out and progressing the story maybe, and making choices on there. And there are a wealth of choices in each particular in each particular card that you can choose. Some of them may not seem completely obvious, and sometimes you take a punt, and sometimes that punt will work out to be a bad choice for you, because in a game that is this deep and this involving, and where timing is absolutely key and critical to you actually progressing and getting to the end of the day and getting to the end of the chapter, it's very easy to be led down a straight path on this and end up somewhere that doesn't necessarily progress the story, doesn't necessarily progress your character, and you feel you may have wasted an entire day and your menhirs are getting very close to becoming dark because you followed a kind of a trail that led nowhere. And that could be a factor for some people. I think this exploration journal is an exceptionally well produced and well-written story that really is dragging me into this. The fact that each of these cards has numerous options, and some of them will not become apparent to you or available to you until you've hit certain stats on here, or until you collected certain secrets cards, or you've achieved certain statuses on there. And there may be a tendency from people, the problem with this, I think, is maybe a tendency to read ahead. And if you read ahead, you're doing yourself no favours whatsoever, because by reading ahead, you're going to start evaluating which choices, and you're going to start diluting the experience of this. And for me, although I love this, I think it's a great book and it works really, really well, I do also think that, say in the vein of the app for this war of mine, that may well
have been better represented in app form. Now, I know that really drives a wedge into a lot of people. A lot of board gamers do not like using apps for their games, so I'm glad that this book is there, because that obviously opens up Tainted Grail for a lot of people. I do wish there had been a simultaneous release of the app with this book, because there is always that temptation there, and I've done it myself. In my early games, I was analysing and thinking, I want to get through this particular part or this particular chapter, and I ended up reading and analysing. Unfortunately, I diluted it, so I'm very, very stringent now on the fact that I make my choice first, then I read the options that are available there. But that is kind of at the heart of this game itself. It's a large, complex story. It covers multitude of different kind of spreading out storylines, which eventually, I should imagine, will all tie together. The exploration is absolutely first rate. You have this constant feeling that even if you're going back to a particular stage, that you're exploring and finding something new. It's very much a game about resource management and about timing as well. We mentioned the red cubes. They are used for absolutely everything, and almost every action you take in this game is going to cost you some of these red cubes, and they become a little bit of a focus for you as you're running around the board trying to maximize your resources, and then you get to a decision point and you think, if I had made a different decision 3 turns ago, I would have the resource for that. You have the menhirs, which are constantly kind of increasing or contracting the board as well, and that again adds an element of time. And for me, I really like that element. I think it's a great way that keeps the pressure on and the tension on in this game and makes you want to explore more. However, for some people, it may well be that is the element of timing, and this resource management is just too much. And unfortunately, in the early hours of you playing the game, it can feel overwhelming. And I myself had maybe 2 or 3 restarts of the campaign before my current game, where I've just finished the end of chapter 2, and there's been some close calls in that. So it's a punishing game. It's not a forgiving game. It's a game that you will constantly make different choices, and you will learn a lot from it as well. With the story being so wide and so complex, there is the possibility that you lose a thread of where you are. Now, if we go onto the save sheet, it does give you an area to make some notes. It's not a very big area. If you're using a pencil, maybe you can rub stuff out on there. Do I suggest making notes? Maybe, because there is a lot going on here, and you're going to be playing it for many, many, many hours. So maybe take additional notes to that as well. Because if you're like me, it's not going to be the only game you play. You're going to play it for a while, put it away maybe for a few days, maybe for a couple of weeks, come back to it, maybe not completely grasp and remember where you are. And again, that can be an issue for people. It may well be that some people will just take that ability to choose to start the adventure again. Now, there are lots of things that we haven't discussed, obviously, because I don't want to spoil too much. This is how we use these timing tokens, not only in the menhirs, but also on the board and quest tokens, and how you flip them for certain things as well. There's a small element of dice play. Your abilities on here, sometimes the chapters in here will ask you to take those abilities, roll a dice, add them together, and that will give you an outcome. So there is a luck-based element to the game as well. Then you have the Guardian die, and every now and again you will get a Guardian, and they will roam around the board, kind of seeking you out, if you like, but not really. It's almost done in a random way. And the way that you would do that is you would place their card on the board and move that around, unless you've got the Monsters of Avalon, and then you would use one of the Guardian figures in there and you would move that around the board. We've not spoke about the Four Dweller. Now, I'm not going to tell you how this this Four Dweller comes into the game, but when they come into the game, and invariably at some point, the chances are you're going to experience the Four Dweller in the game. It creates even more pressure on timing there, more pressure as you become hunted almost by the Four Dweller. Look, there's a lot going on in this game. I think I really, really, really like this game. A lot of people have been waiting for this game to arrive, and for me, I think the amount of thought and dedication and kind of concept that's gone into this have created a unique experience. You will have played elements of this game before. It's very easy to say, doing this expanding map is Seventh Continent. Using a paper-based kind of system to record your stats is Dungeons and Dragons, or it's Kingdom Death Monster. moving around the map and kind of timing your moves to maximise them may be similar to City of Kings, and all those things are absolutely correct. And if you don't like those elements of those particular games, then it may be that this game isn't for you. It's a big and involved game. It's going to demand a lot of your time. There's a rather cynical thing in the Monsters of Avalon, whereby we've got this, if you plumped for this, there are some great and fantastic looking miniatures in here. Do they add anything to the game? No. They're very much a visual flair, and you certainly, if you've got that in the core game, then maybe 50% of that box you will never ever put on the board because they will come apparent in future chapters. So there is a slightly cynical there. I can understand why Awaken Realms have released that, because people like minis. And I have used them when I've had Guardians come out, and they do add to the flair of the board itself. Other than that, I don't think there's anything extraneous here. I think that everything that's on the board and everything that's in the box works really, really well. The save system is absolutely fantastic. It's entirely possible to use that save system kind of mid-game or mid-chapter. I've only used it at the end of the chapters, and it's great. It makes storing and pulling things out again an absolute breeze, because it gives you a true state of kind of game saving there. And there's no way that anybody is going to leave this game out on their table forever, because it's going to take days and days and days of continuous playing to actually do this. Look, I think it's a great game. I am so pleased that I got the opportunity to play this game, from the tutorial, which is just fantastic, to actually immersing myself within the game itself. It's been an absolute joy. Now, as we come to the solo game, there are two aspects that you can do solo. You can do true solo, or you can do either double-headed or choose more characters. I've done both, and I would say that true solo is a particularly punishing game, because what happens on true solo is if your character dies, that's it. That is game over. You do get a few when you're down in the danger zones, you do get a few extra mitigation conditions for true solo, which you don't get in co-op. So that's good. That's okay. That allows you to potentially have a better chance of prolonging your time in the game. But if your character dies in true solo, that's it. That's game over. Whereas in co-op, what happens is, yes, you can die a lot sooner, but you can also then choose another character that hasn't been used yet from the box to install them into the game and continue your adventure. So for me, playing double-headed is absolutely the way forward. If you want a more difficult challenge, by all means, go true solo. And I did that for my first couple of games, and yeah, it is punishing, but it taught me a lot about how the game works itself. So, guys, look, thank you very much for sticking with me throughout this review of Tainted Grail. I hope I haven't spoiled too much of the game for you. I tried to keep my lid on most of the things. I've certainly not shown you inside the exploration journal. I haven't even talked about how the chapter cards work. I haven't talked about secret cards or the items cards or these extra stacks cards that you can get here. There's lots that I haven't discussed. There's lots that I'm leaving you guys kind of the ability to discover for yourselves. Thank you all very much for joining me on this journey through Tainted Grail. If you want a more detailed look inside the tutorial and the solo campaign, and you want to see a playthrough of that, then please check out Paul Grogan's gaming rules video, where he played through the entirety of the solo tutorial on Tainted Grail. That'll give you an even more in-depth look of how the game plays. From my perspective, as I say, this is just, it's a massive game that I'm really pleased I had the opportunity for. It absolutely gets the Not Board Gaming seal of excellence, because I think that it's just a phenomenally produced product. Once again, thank you very much for joining Not Board Gaming. I'm Mark, I'm your host. Remember, you can always follow us on Facebook at Not Board Gaming. That's always BORED, and on Instagram as well. Please don't forget that if you liked the video here, then you can always like and subscribe to the channel, and please do check out our other videos. So, one final thought: if you have nobody else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves.